on the minutes from February 10th?
Russ,
Yes.
can I go back and do roll call real quick? Just,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please do.
it's okay. It's a new process. We'll just do roll call.
Okay.
Steve Bertable is absent. Peter Breen,
Here.
Dennis Harder,
Here.
Patricia Kendall, absent. David Oster, absent. Steve Rabinowitz,
Here.
Tanya Nara,
Here.
and Julia Volich, absent. Thank you. Now we could go to number 2 on the agenda, which is the minutes.
Great. Any comments on the minutes from February 10th? No. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make the motion.
Okay, and second? Okay, all in favor?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Good. Okay, public comment on non-agenda items. Do we have anyone from the community that has any comments? I don't see anyone here, do I?
Our first public comment would be from Danny Sheehan.
Okay.
Good morning, all. I probably should save this until after the general manager has made his report, but I do hope that somebody will address the grand jury report regarding the COC. Thank you. Good morning and have a great day.
Thank you. I see that Julia has joined us too. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Noted.
Okay, so we'll move to the, any other comments?
No other comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to Eddie. If you're going to talk about the role of Citizens Oversight Committee. Eddie, you're on.
Absolutely, thank you. Give me just a second here to share my screen. Well, thank you very much, Chair and members of the Citizens Oversight Committee. For this particular line item, just wanted to talk about the role of the Citizens Oversight Committee. Wanted to talk about, this is something we talked about at our last meeting. You know, kind of had a plan moving forward of what we were going to talk about in this meeting, kind of nail some things down before we took it back to the board. But as you are aware, most of you are probably aware that we received some recommendations from the civil grand jury late last week. So what I wanted to talk about, just talk about the requirement of what's written, the guidance that's out there. We'll talk about the civil grand jury recommendations, and then we'll talk about some of the suggestions that I have moving forward. And then I think the big part of this piece is to open it up for discussion and get some feedback from members of the COC. So there's very limited guidance. The guidance that's out there in regards to the Citizens Oversight Committee says, a Citizens Oversight Committee will be established by the SMART Board to provide input and review on the strategic plan and subsequent updates. The committee will be composed of citizens from the SMART district appointed by the board. That is the guidance that we have of how this committee was established. This is a Measure Q requirement. You know, I think that the requirement is currently met, but as I mentioned earlier, SMART received recommendations from the Sonoma County Civil Grand Jury, and I'd like to go through each one of those. Not every single one of them was directed at the Citizens Oversight Committee, but the overwhelming majority of them were. So recommendation 1, by January 31st, 2023, the Board of Directors expand the role of the Citizens Oversight Committee beyond the minimal requirements of the Measure Q expenditure plan to achieve expectations of citizens oversight and accountability. Recommendation 2, by January 31st, 2023, the Board of Directors consider additional advisory committees to generate informed, independent advice on important matters under consideration, including but not limited to increasing ridership, building public trust, new lines of business, sale of assets, finance, and other significant decisions. Recommendation 3, by January 31st, 2023, the Board of Directors reassessed the SMART organizational structure such that the Citizens Oversight Committee and any future advisory committees report directly to the board. Recommendation 4, By January 31st, 2023, the Board of Directors requires Citizens Oversight Committee analysis and recommendations prior to all major strategic decisions, whether or not incorporated into the 5-year strategic plan. Recommendation 5, the Board of Directors define and implement advisory committee bylaws for the Citizens Oversight Committee by January 31st, 2023. Recommendation 6, the Board of Directors define the length of term for Citizen Oversight Committee members by January 31st, 2023. Recommendation 7, by January 31st, 2023, the Board of Directors develop suitable training programs for new and existing members of the Citizens Oversight Committee regarding their newly defined role and proper public committee protocols such as Brown Act rules. Recommendation 8, by December 31st, 2022, the Board of Directors direct the Citizens Oversight Committee to prepare written recommendations or reports to be presented at or entered into the record of the Board of Directors meetings. Recommendation 9, the Board of Directors direct the General Manager to provide a timeline to evaluate the financial viability of freight services by March 31st, 2023. Recommendation 10, the Board of Directors and the General Manager establish separate bank accounts for the monies associated with passenger transit and freight or other future ventures by December 31st, 2022. And finally, recommendation 11, the Board of Directors direct advisory committees to develop and implement a policy to keep documents and information related to their advisory role centrally located and remotely accessible by January 31st, 2023. So obviously, this will be opened up for discussion right after this slide. I think everybody understands these are the boards. This is the Board of Directors' decisions as to how they navigate this and how they act upon these recommendations. But obviously, I'll be facilitating that discussion of taking that to the board. I plan to do that at the next board meeting, which I believe is on July 16th. And so that's where that discussion will take place. Obviously, I will make some suggestions. And so as it stands today with what I know, my suggestions will be as follows. Expand COC to review and provide input while still maintaining the focus on strategic planning and financial planning as originally intended. Review quarterly financial information, provide feedback to SMART on the annual budget, capital projects, and SMART major strategic initiatives. COC reports to the Board of Directors biannually or more often, if appropriate, on financial, capital, or strategic matters under review. And what I mean by that is that we'd have a standing, my recommendation would be that we have a standing agenda item, in the Board of Directors meeting, at least biannually, more if it's feasible, to have the opportunity for the COC chair to speak to the board, and then establish and update bylaws, terms, and appointment criteria. And I think that'll be the major work associated with that, is just really updating all the bylaws and making sure that the roles and responsibilities, terms, and the appointment criteria of how we select new COC members in the future would be the major lift on this one. So with that, I will turn it back to the chair and open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Eddie. So I guess we just open it up for comment. I see David has his hand up. So David, you're muted, by the way.
Oh, David Oster, I didn't intend to have my hand up now. I'm sorry, that must have been a mistake. But I'll start the discussion if you like.
Go ahead.
Well, there's been from time to time a lot of discussion, or not action, but discussion about the misleading term of oversight committee and what the role should be. And maybe it's implied in what was just presented, but my basic point of decision is whether or not there should be an additional committee that does things like ridership and fares and stations and things, and then some other financial type committee like the Citizens Oversight Committee, which would keep maybe the name has changed, but it would keep its role rather than getting into all the other details. And I don't know if that's just jumping in, but that's really a point of decision for me, is should we be expanding this committee to do everything, or does it make sense, staff wise and otherwise, to separate them? So that's my discussion anyway about that.
I think, yeah, I think Steve had his hand up, but then Dennis. Steve
I
Bertlebaum.
actually didn't. Oh, sorry.
Steve Bertlebaum. You,
Yes. I think the thing that the grand jury did not really delve into, and which is also something that we need to consider, is that the opportunity for people to make comments at board meetings is rather limited and stilted. What happens at the board meeting is at the end of presentation of an agenda item, the chair asks for any public comment. People will get up and, you know, talk for a minute or so, or two or three even. And there may be 4 or 5 comments. By the end of those, the board has got some sense of what the public sees going on, but there hasn't been a chance for any kind of exchange because somebody will present an issue, and then the next person will present an issue, and then the next person will present an issue. And the back and forth that should take place around those kinds of comments just doesn't happen. And I can understand from the board's perspective why it doesn't happen. They've got a lot of business to do. The staff has done a pretty good job of putting the issues together, but the public leaves feeling that, well, somebody may have heard me, but what I really wanted to say didn't get digested. So the thing that this group could prevent or present, or perhaps another group as well as this one, is an opportunity for someone to engage in a give and take with people who are presenting issues and perhaps ideas to SMART for development. I wouldn't want the board to change its process greatly, but I think there is an advantage for regular opportunities for the public to get together with other citizens, the members of this group or some other group, and the staff for a less stilted discussion of whatever issues people are concerned about.
I think that maybe that's kind of the crux here. I mean, the COCs, our responsibilities are pretty narrow. I think Eddie has made a great comment in terms of having a specific time and presenting to the board. I guess twice a year is what you're suggesting, Eddie, and I think that's great. But keeping our role limited. I think if the board, I mean, there's an issue there that you brought up, which maybe is more a board issue than a COC. People make comments, but they don't really have any interchange. So I think if the board decides that there should be more a forum for that, maybe it's in a different format than in the COC. So I don't know if that's where it ends up, but that's one of the things I think that probably should be considered. But anyway, who had their hand up was Dennis Harder, I think was next, right? Dennis?
Thank you. Listen, I'm supportive of the general manager's comments and recommendations as brought forward, but I also like David's suggestion about having separate committees to look over specific items. Like on I sit on, some of you also sit on the Citizens, Sonoma County Transit Authority, Citizens Advisory Committee. And so there's technical committee, there's a different type of committees, of which are really engaged in certain things. So in this case, we could have freight, you could have ridership, you could have new ideas, new business type of committees that are reporting back either to the COC or to the board directly. And so it's a different group of people with more expertise that are very focused in a certain area of transit that rather than just a general oversight type of a situation. So a combination of two I'd like to see.
Okay. Thank you. Who was next? I think Peter was next.
Yeah, pardon me. I think that the, pardon me, that the report and the recommendations are exactly what we needed. And I think it points out the difficulty that we've had from the very outset of this committee, because by nature, it was set to be a restrictive group. And we really never got into any of the real issues, I think, that we need to provide. And if I were doing anything, I would almost look for a total revamping of the COC and how we report, not only report, but recommend to the board various actions and activities, because the COC is the ability to expand the oversight of the board and the community. It brings more community input into the board. And I want to get in that reports again. I think that the COC, if we have subcommittees, or if there is a subcommittee, a group of subcommittees, that they really report and make some recommendations. Recommendations don't mean control, but they mean a little bit more than just a reporting back of a group discussion. So I think that, I guess what I'm sort of asking is, can SMART and the attorney come up with a proposal to bring to us that incorporates all of the issues that are mentioned in the grand jury, and all those issues that staff and the board feel are necessary? Because I think right now we're directionless, and we really need to start to focus on SMART and our relationship to the community and the board. Rather long, but.
Thank you, Peter. And then
Yeah.
Steve, and then Julia.
I agree with many of the recommendations from the general manager. I'd like to start though with the idea of appointing an advisory committee, which we've talked about before. We deal with financial matters. We don't really deal with the full range of issues, as Dennis mentioned and David mentioned. So I think that would be a good idea, because there are a lot of issues we just won't be able to give the public the answers that they might like, or allow them the input that I think is very important, particularly as this all gets closer to the next election. There really should be a more open process in terms of community input. In terms of our group, yeah, we have a more specific, very specific function in terms of the strategic plan, but I think it could be more than just the developing the strategic plan. If you think back at our last one, think about all the changes that have happened since our last strategic plan. It's just massive what has occurred. And so I think there should probably be like quarterly reviews of the strategic plan and how well it's applying to the current situation. So I do agree with having more of a role, continuous role by the committee. But I go back to Dennis's idea as well about having a finance committee with perhaps within the board, or somehow that would deal with ongoing issues that might be occurring, because we're not going to be the board in a group that will be able to make or recommend changes or policies or programs or whatever for every financial decision that comes up. So I think quarterly meetings would be more significant, and we should review the strategic plan, and that will result, I believe, in more financial issues being considered by this group. Thank you.
Thank you. Julia?
I want to make sure we're not forgetting one of the most important things
when we formed the initial COC. We're talking a lot right now about skill set and where we might be able to help with ridership and where we might be able to help with finance. But where I feel like the COC was first developed and established was to give a voice to the different user groups and communities that utilize the train. So for example, I was brought on for bike ped, and I read every single board packet specifically to bike ped. And when we were originally laying down the tracks, making sure that in places like San Rafael, we had, the train was able to, be established, but we'd still have bike ped facilities so that people could get around. I feel like there's, user groups in the canal that use this train that we are not listening to. I feel like there's user groups that are commuters that we might not be listening to. So I understand the importance of bringing our skill sets. I know, for example, we do have some very high-powered finance people on this COC committee, but I also don't want to lose sight of what our voice is, and that is representing the groups that we represent to make sure that the smart train, which is an initiative between Sonoma and Marin, that those communities are actually heard and represented, and that important issues that are important to those communities are brought to light. We've been doing it outside of the COC because that seems like the only effective way to do it, and attending board meetings, and hasn't been as much. There hasn't been as much need to be involved lately with the bike ped community, but it's more important when we were initially establishing routes. But I think that that's something we should think about, is all the different user groups, and there are many, and make sure that they have a voice on this committee.
Thank you, Julia. I think Tanya has her hand up too.
Yeah, thank you. Julia, I really appreciate your comments, and they're really interesting to me because what you shared is not what I've ever understood to be the focus of the COC, but is really, I think, what I think all of us are speaking to in terms of the need for some type of a different advisory committee. And I would definitely be in support of having another citizens advisory committee that would do exactly as you're saying, have representation for the different types of user groups, the bike ped, the riders, et cetera, and really give the public and the community an opportunity to have that forum to interact with, because I think that's a theme that keeps coming up in all of these discussions, that the work that the COC does is written in a measure Q and is very important, but we do have different skill sets and are not representative of the entire community that SMART serves. And so I think I really resonate with your points and would be very much in favor of having, I support the general manager's recommendations for this committee, but then really looking at a second committee that would be that citizens advisory committee and could take up all the other issues that we're not able to get to.
So I guess that brings up a good point, and maybe go back to Eddie on that one. It's not. I think it's incumbent on us to define what we've done and what we've been doing, and to expand that really is not our role. It's the board's role to do that. And I like what Eddie is saying. Regular meetings, reviewing financials quarterly, reporting to the board. Terrific, and that's providing some structure in terms of bylaws and term limits, things of that nature. I think it's really important because then you have real structure. But beyond that, beyond what has been defined that the COC does, anything different, I think if the board wants that, then I think that should be in a separate group, or the board redefine it. But I think that's the board's call. It's nice, nice to say those things, but I think the board's gonna have to make that decision. And unless I'm mistaken, I know Peter wants to say something about that, but can I ask Eddie first to comment there?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Before last Thursday, when I received the recommendations, I had a plan to come to recommend to this group, because I kind of heard kind of the same things at our last meeting. There's some that would like to have a much more expanded role, and there's others that think that this group ought to continue to focus on the finances. My recommendation before was going to be what I referred to as the Executive Team Advisory Committee. And it's what many of you have described, where myself and the CFO and the chief engineer and operations would meet with a group of folks. We would select those people based on our 4 strategic objectives of ridership, pathways, extensions, and freight, and kind of have their expertise, and it'd be somebody we would meet with on a regular basis and, you know, get feedback and be able to bounce ideas off of, and kind of inform some of our decision making and as we, you know, develop our strategies moving forward. But it was interesting to me that this came back, that this was from the civil grand jury, is it wasn't so much about influencing staff, it was more about influencing the board. So I don't know how this group feels about that, but that's where my mind was prior to seeing this. Is, you know, I've had several people reach out to me and say, hey, we want to help, we want to be a part of this. And so my idea was, well, great, we could set up a formalized meeting where we discuss kind of what we're doing and what's going on in the agency, where we're headed, bounce ideas off of, but that's not necessarily directly related to the board. So I'd be open to hearing what folks' feedback is on that versus, you know, staff meeting with citizens versus them having access to the board directly.
Great, thank you, Eddie. Peter?
Yeah, I think what you just said, Eddie, is precisely the direction we need to go in. I think one of the problems that we have is we have kind of established a tradition that probably needs to be upended a little bit. And we need to almost approach it from a, what is it, tabula rasa point of view. And you could build, or staff could build a proposal for us, because we're just all firing at different points right now. And I think what we want to do is create a group, a committee, or whatever that makes reports, recommendations to the board. But I don't think the current structure or the history and tradition works that way. So it would be a major shift in whatever we do or are doing. I think we need to upend what we've been doing. And I would, you know, strongly recommend that we get a group together and get a document from Eddie and staff on what their sense of the direction should be. And we can provide the community input to that working document so that in the end, we're able to meet the requirements of the grand jury and at the same time be most beneficial to SMART in its operations. I really felt that the recommendations and the report were written almost at night in the dark by staff. And I really applaud the grand jury because they really got into it. They hit on all the points that I see us needing to do. I just don't see the traditional COC being able to do that given our past history and traditions, if you will. So I guess I'm saying we need to upend ourselves.
So can I ask a clarifying question real quick, please? Is it important to, from the advisory portion, is it critically important that if we create another advisory committee type operation that they have direct access to the board? Or is it more about just being able to express ideas and thoughts? And, you know, in regards to what Steve Bertelbaugh said, you know, of that back and forth and being able to really, you know, get into some of the technical issues and things that happen and go on. That's what I'm trying to get my head wrapped around. Because like I said, that was going to be my recommendation, is that we slightly expand what the COC does. I was going to recommend that we meet quarterly. My head was there already. But, you know, having formal, you know, meetings with the board with what they already have on their plate, I don't know how that's going to go. I don't know how the board's going to look at that and view that. But doing something where we do it with staff and we have a set meeting, and again, we select people based on expertise, right, of, you know, ridership and things like that. But I don't think that necessarily meets the intent of the way that the recommendations are written for the grand jury. But if you want my personal opinion, I think that would be very effective to have that group I already answer a lot of emails and take a lot of phone calls from people in the public, right? Really, what it would be is be formalizing that type of group and actually having a face-to-face meeting from time to time and being able to document those things and also being able to share kind of what we learn with the board. So I'd just be open to, what folks say, because again, we would be kind of splitting. We wouldn't be exactly, if we went that direction, we wouldn't be exactly doing what the grand jury recommended.
Thanks, Eddie. From my perspective, I know we have 3 people who want to have their hands up, so we'll get to each one. But it seems like a good idea, and it seems like, reporting, having a group that works with management as opposed to the board, who's involved in it day to day, makes all the sense in the world. With the COC retaining its role as it is now, and I think what Eddie has suggested, quarterly meetings, financial updates, and then semi-annual report to the board about their recommendation, whatever, is I think perfect, and really doing a better job of clarifying the terms and having bylaws, things of that nature, and really separating those two things. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that to me would be a good direction to go. So I'll just start. Julia, you have your hand up, and then I'll go to Tanya and Steve, and I'm just going across the screen here. So Julia, did you have a comment?
No, I did not. I don't know why.
You have your hand up.
I will, I'll lower my hand.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Tanya?
Yeah, so Eddie, I'm very intrigued by your idea, and it's not something that I had really thought about as a possibility, but I guess what I'm wondering is, could we combine that idea and perhaps have that working or executive group that you're talking about, maybe there's some mechanism of reporting or sharing with the COC on a periodic basis, so we have some sense, this committee has an understanding of what's happening at that staff level committee, and if there are any concerns or issues that we see in that, if we don't think it's working, or we're hearing from the public that they're not satisfied with that we still have a mechanism to report to the board. But I can see what you're proposing to be a much more effective way, and I think giving folks who are really passionate about SMART and want to have a role and influence an opportunity to do that in a really it sounds like an effective way. It sounds like you're very open to hearing that feedback and responding to it. And I think, staff has been demonstrating that since you've been on board. So I'm definitely interested in that idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Steve?
Well, I think I would like to look more closely at the idea of unscrambling all of this and taking a whole new view of what advisory committees are most useful for the staff and for the board. And the thing that I realize is that it takes quite a bit of staff time and effort to prepare for these meetings. And how much time do they have? And also, it requires quite a bit of background information for us to make really valid evaluations of our long-range financial situation. And maybe we should be spending more time with the staff to look at things like, as we get into freight, how is that managed and so forth. I'm not sure that we want to have 2 committees, one meeting regularly with the staff and one meeting quarterly to do the financial oversight.
Okay. So make sure that I understand what you're saying. You think that all of that should be under the COC instead of separating the roles there?
Yes, I do.
So we should also bring up the fact that this is if let's just say that was the case, that's a pretty significant commitment for people on this committee. And while some people may want to do that. There's others that may not want to spend that kind of time. And I think that the COC's role is, despite all the discussion, it's actually pretty well defined. It just, we don't maybe have the structure around it, but if management can use a committee to their benefit to address issues that might be out there for SMART, that's great. And I think having a group that works with the staff to identify and potentially change things to deal with issues that have arisen for SMART, then I think that's great for staff, and that allows them to do their job better. And so I think that's the point of what Eddie was suggesting. And I think the COC role is I'm not sure that we want to expand it like you're talking, because I personally don't have any interest in being in that kind of a role, because that's a lot. And there may be others who don't. Maybe there are others some that do, but I don't know. I don't know if anybody has any other further comments beyond that. Let's see, Peter.
Yeah, Russ. A little bit of history, because I was on the committee that developed the original ballot measure. And in truth, we put that in there for political purposes. We wanted to show, and everybody wants to show, any tax measure. The inclusion of citizens oversight always makes people feel good that the citizens and not the staff are paying attention to everything. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to look at this again in the context of oversight, because are we doing oversight, or is the COC doing oversight, or is it being a committee or a group of committees that recommend to the board of directors and the executive committee what should be done? They review it, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the tradition that we've been operating under for so many years is tradition that was set at the very outset. So I'm looking at this as almost a tabula rasa, so that we can really sit back and say, okay, what's the best useful organization? And as I've said before, maybe staff can give us a draft that we can, that fits their need. And then we take that back and say, okay, how are we going to put this in the context of the broader community, the user community, et cetera? Otherwise, we're going to be just groping around here for the next couple of meetings, which I think Russ and I agree with you. We don't want to get too involved, but we want to be able to be useful to the overall operation of SMART. Anyway.
So I want to be clear. I want to make sure that, we'll help out in any way we can as staff, but I want to be very clear. These are the board's decisions. Right? This isn't a staff decision where the staff writes up and says, this is what we think it ought to be. We can make some suggestions and things like that. And we need to do this relatively quickly, because we have 60 days the board has 60 days to respond to these grand jury recommendations. And so we will be going to the board, like I said before, on July 16th and providing that information. So I don't know, Tom, if you have anything to add to the timeline or how we navigate this.
No, I don't have anything to add. As you can tell from the grand jury report, they've put some timelines that they'd like to see certain things happen. So, if the board is inclined to accept their recommendations, that will be part of their responses back to the grand jury, and whether or not those timelines will be maintained. So my recommendation when it goes to the board will be, if the board is inclined to accept those recommendations, that they accept it along with their timelines that they've put in.
One thing I find interesting was the comment I believe Tanya made. Obviously, as we go through this, we're going to have to make some recommendations. The board's going to have to make some decisions in regards to what the structure looks like, right? Almost like an organizational structure. And if we were to go the direction of what I refer to as the ETAC, the Executive Team Advisory Committee, you could have it set up so that you have the board, and then you have the COC, and then you have under the COC kind of this ETAC, and then having the ETAC report quarterly to the COC during their meeting as to what they're talking about. That structurally seems to make sense to me. I don't know how the board will feel about that. Obviously, this is their decision, but that's something I didn't think about. I think it sounds like a really good idea to me.
So how does this process work? Or is the board expecting a response from the COC or the board or management to come back and make a recommendation?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think, I think the way that this will go down, and if you were interested in attending that July 16th board meeting and speaking on behalf of the COC, I'd be happy to have you there, Russ. But basically I need to present this and facilitate it similar to the way I did today. Obviously, I think most of you know I'm a very open-minded person. And so as I pointed out, when I gave my suggestions, those were my suggestions as of starting this meeting. Obviously, I'm going to listen to this group and provide what I heard here today as well. And Russ, if you would like to attend that meeting and express kind of the thoughts of the COC, that would be great. I'd be happy to have you as a part of that presentation. But that's kind of the way I thought this would go down, is just saying, hey, here, basically the same information I presented to you. Here's the requirement. Here are the recommendations. These are my suggestions. And then it turns into a discussion similar to what we've had here today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, I think what there's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation here. We probably have to get together the thoughts in terms of what the COC would like to do, and at the board meeting present that. So we have some work to do in terms of crystallizing that. I mean, we have a lot of different thoughts here, and I just want to make sure that we don't go back to the board in conflict with the people that are here. I mean, I kind of like, I guess I like the structure too, that maybe you have that, what you call ETAC. ETAC, is that what you call them?
Yeah, ETAC.
ETAC. Having that as the sounding board for the community, I suppose, and then maybe that's making a quarterly report to the COC, which then reports to the board every 6 months. That structure maybe makes sense. Of course, the devil's in the details here, but it seems like there's some logic behind that. I think the two Steves both have their hands up. I'll go with Steve Rabinowitz first, and then Bertoloff.
I think Eddie's idea is very interesting. I don't have a real final recommendation at this point. I think there's a lot floating around here, like Russ says. I do want to point out I'm a member of the advisory committee for the Sonoma County Ag Preservation and Open Space District, and we're appointed by board members, and 2 per district, and then there's someone from the environment, business, real estate, and agriculture. So there's 17 members of so it kind of comes from different points of view, which could provide a similar kind of structure in a way, involving constituent groups in some sort of an advisory committee. But it also has a financial committee, is separate. And they do report both to the board, but the staff, the executive director, general manager in this case of the Open Space District, is integrally involved in both those organizations. So that is a system that I think works. As far as your ETAC idea, that's really interesting. I don't know exactly structurally what to suggest there, but I just wanted to bring that up. And the other issue regarding how long we serve and responsibilities and so on, I think it is time to look at that. We've been on this committee for a long time, and I think it's something we need to consider. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks. Steve, the other Steve.
I just wanted to point out that we have 11 attendees that are not panelists. One of them has his hand up, his or her. And maybe we need to open this up to those 11 folks.
We have a public comment from Jack Swearingen.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Steve, for that opportunity. I've been listening to all of this, and as many of you know, I chair the citizens organization called Friends of Smart. And you know us, we're the group that always stands up and criticizes in writing or at the podium. But we're all in training. We are actually learning how to offer possibilities rather than problems. We're learning how to couch our complaints in terms of solutions. We're doing this. I'm beating on people, and we're determined to change our way of interacting with the public so that we become more, what's the right word, listenable. So I think we'll start hearing more solutions rather than more problems from us. If we have a problem to bring up that you may or may not be aware of, we'll bring it along with a proposed solution. And we are made up of transit advocates. Some might call us zealots. There are some zealots. Transit and rail in particular. We believe that these are keys to the best way to move this culture forward out of the mess we're in with regard to energy and traffic and greenhouse emissions. So as I listened and I read the grand jury report, many of us have, and I read it and I thought, gosh, Friends of Smart thinks all these things. And we've been beating about these things. Some of them we brought up. I don't mean that we're doing it and you're not. I just mean we have thought about it and argued about it. And so it occurs to me, we're already a citizens group with ideas. We study SMART and we study transit. We study the whole big picture. I would think it might be in our mutual benefit to have, I offer Friends of SMART as one of those citizens groups that you can listen to, meet with periodically, quarterly, monthly. Eddie can't do everything, but he has some staff who might be able to help with that, because you'll get almost a prepackaged collection of public input and ideas from the public, because that's who we are. So I make that as a possible suggestion for moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Are there others? No other comments?
I believe Jack Swearingen may have raised his hand again. I'll give him another chance to talk.
That was a mistake. I was trying to stop doing it, stop talking.
All right, thank you. Okay, so maybe what we need to do, because I think we need to move along. We have a number of things to cover here, but based on all the comments today, maybe what we need to do is to come back to the committee with maybe a recommendation in terms of how we move forward. We've got a lot of comments. I don't, and a lot of different ideas. So, maybe Eddie and I, maybe if there's volunteers on the committee who would like to work with Eddie on that, I'm happy to do it. But if there's others that would like to do that, to come up with a recommendation, which we then take to the board, that'd be great. So anyone who would like to, Sir Peter?
I'll help.
Okay, all right. Anyone else?
And I'm happy to help as well. And I wonder if, since I think we have a couple of different, maybe there's a couple of different themes here, that perhaps what we could do is maybe summarize those and not necessarily say we arrived at one recommendation, but here are a couple different options that the committee shared, because I think there's merit in those different options. And so I don't know without having more time to discuss as a committee, if we could come up with a single recommendation, but maybe we could have a couple different options that we share that represent the inputs from the committee today and the public.
Okay. Tanya, Peter, and Steve. Okay, so after this, we will we'll double back and try and come up with maybe the best way to start is, Eddie, we can come up with those options, and then instead of everybody having a lot of writers here, just have one, and then come back to that smaller group and kind of flush it out and see if we can come up with a unified kind of idea, and then we'll share it with the whole COC. How's that sound?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's important that for recommending to the board, it should be the voice of the COC overall. And I know there's some differing opinions here, but I think my recommendation would be that COC arrive at what they think is the right thing to do moving forward.
So okay, so we'll do that, and we'll double back after this meeting. And
can I just ask one question for IT? Is there anybody else from the public that's wishing to speak? I expected a lot more interaction than what we've received.
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay.
okay, good. Then we'll move on, and I'll coordinate that and come back to the three of you, and then as well as Eddie, and then we'll try and come up with something that we can all agree on, and then come back to the COC and make sure that everybody is and like Eddie said, I think it makes sense to make sure that the COC has a unified voice and goes back to the board with what we recommend, and we'll go from there. How's that sound?
Russ, I'm not sure that you saw that I'm interested in being part of that group as well.
I said I got you, Steve. Steve, Tanya, and Peter. That's who I have. Is anybody else? Is that?
Well, which Steve do you have?
I have you. I didn't. Steve Bertelmann. I don't think Steve Rabinowitz said yes. I think it was you.
All right.
That's right. The other Steve, you can have both Steves if you want, but.
Well, I'd be happy to do it, but then we start getting into a quorum kind of issue. So
Exactly. So
we
that,
want to stay
we'll go with that
shy of that.
Then we'll go from there. Okay. Is everybody good with that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to thank you for all that discussion. I think there's a lot of great ideas, and we'll get there eventually. But and Eddie, I'll come back to you, and we'll coordinate all this if that's okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll move on to strategic planning. Eddie again.
All right. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to provide an update on planning for the future. Just as a reminder, it's been a while. I think at our last meeting, we talked a little bit about what we were doing with our strategic planning. This was the model we were using. We started with a SWOT analysis that identified our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We worked with the board. The board created a mission and vision and identified our strategic objectives. And we conducted some listening sessions. We're going through that. And so anyway, just as a reminder, this is the model we're using. And as we continue through this process, ultimately, we will develop our strategies, deploy our strategies, and monitor performance and make sure we're aimed on achieving results. I won't go through this. This is just as a reminder. This was the original SWOT analysis, the SWOT analysis that identified our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This was presented to the board. And, as we went through that process, again, this is some information you've seen before, but really these are the questions. And still today, it was several months ago when I met with this group and I said, these are the questions I'm getting. But as if I've been out talking, we still are receiving the same questions. So again, it's very, very important that as we develop our strategies moving forward, that these questions are answered. So this is what was created. This is the work of our board of directors. We refer to it as the Smart House. They identified our values of safety, integrity, stewardship, and continuous improvement. That's the foundation of our house. The pillars of our house are our strategic objectives: ridership, pathways, extensions, and freight. Our ceiling is our mission statement. Board come up with "We Connect Communities," and what that means is that SMART provides safe, reliable, and environmentally responsible transportation options. And then, of course, the roof of our house is smarter transportation for a smarter future. And that means that SMART envisions an innovative transportation system that provides integrated mobility solutions, promotes sustainable growth, and enhances quality of life. The next step after we had this information is we started conducting listening sessions with the public. We did 4 listening sessions in the month of April. Our first one was ridership on April 6th. We had 45 participants. We had 553 survey responses, and we received 35 emails. On April 13th, the week after, we conducted a listening session on pathways. We had 60 participants, 183 survey responses, and 11 emails. For extensions, on April 20th, we had 54 participants, 203 surveys, 13 emails. And then freight was April 27th, where we had 34 participants, 65 survey responses, and 1 email. So as we look at where we are today and how we move forward, the next step in this process is to present the listening session information to the board of directors. The plan there is that we're going to give the board all the raw data, everything that was said, and then we're going to summarize that into a presentation and get some feedback from the board, obviously make some suggestions, and use that information to inform our goals and our strategies moving forward. And then again, I jumped ahead a little bit, but developing goals aligned with our objectives, develop and deploy our strategy to achieve our goals and objectives. And, you know, as I pointed out the last time we met, monitoring performance is a key point in achieving your desired results, because you need to watch, you need to monitor, you need to watch KPIs. And if something isn't going as planned, then you need to be willing to adjust and make changes, you know, to make sure that we are focused on achieving our ultimate outcome. And so that's where we are with strategic planning and planning for the future. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Anybody have a question for Freddie on this? It's perfect, evidently. So there you go. Okay. No questions, then we'll move on to ridership update.
All right, I'll go back and share my screen again. Okay, ridership. So I think we have a really good story to tell. Ridership is growing. If you look at from this slide, to orient you, FY22 is blue, FY21 is orange. And what we've really been looking at and monitoring is kind of watching our ridership grow from that January low. If you look between January and February, ridership was up 21%. It jumped another 18% to March. It was up 2% in April, jumped another 4% in May. And month to date, we're currently at about 2% above where we were in May. We had a really good week last week. We watched ridership perform very well. This week has been relatively standard, you know, with our kind of our steady growth. But last week was really good for us. And so if you compared month to date June to where we were in January, our ridership is up 55%, which is something I'm thrilled about. Obviously, we still have a long way to go to get ridership to ultimately where we want to be. But it's good to see that we are continuing to make progress and bringing riders back. This has been interesting and just another way of looking at ridership, you know, as we think about the new normal where people work from home. You know, all the data that I've seen says that, you know, that on average, the typical work week moving forward would be Tuesday through Thursday. And it's interesting that we are seeing that in our ridership. You can see that Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays on average are about 20% higher than Monday and Fridays. And so I said this in the board meeting, but I'll say it again. for those people that are just getting out and riding the train and doing a day trip and having a good time and traveling around, Mondays and Fridays are great days to travel, and they can avoid the crowds. So that's a plug. Saturdays and Sundays, our weekend ridership has really jumped. If you look at May, you can see that it was up significantly over where we were in April. It was up 70%. A large driver of that was adding Sunday service. We added Sunday service on May 1st. And in the month of May, we had 3,222 Sunday boardings, which was really good. But that doesn't completely tell the whole story. It wasn't just that added service. Saturday service has been doing well. A lot of people are using it. You know, obviously there's a lot of events going on, parades, car shows, different things like that, just festivals, things of that nature. But a lot of people have been using the train to do those things. We have been promoting with what we call tips for trips, just putting information out there, letting people know how they can use the train to get to some of these festivities. You probably know or may have heard, we had the Giants game a special that we ran on June 12th. We ran that train down. We ran a 3-car train down on our 931 southbound trip, and then we ran a special train back after the game. This is really good to see. This is a video that I'll show of a 3-car train pulling into Larkspur, and you can see all the people getting off, and as you'll see how they're dressed, you can tell that the vast majority of them are fans. So I will stop talking for a minute and watch the train come in. And I, be honest, I love seeing the 3-car train. You can start to see the platform really filling up. So just a few more pictures. You know, my favorite picture on this slide is in the top right, where you have the child that's a Giants fan and the Dodgers fan. So that's kind of I'm sure they have some interesting conversations on the way home. But it was just really good. We had folks on the train, and everybody was happy. Everybody was having a good time. Just a few more pictures. You can again see the platform, the number of people coming off the train. And just, you know, there's somebody in each one of the seats there. So it's just really good to see. And this is a great service. Here's some details on the Giants game service. We ran a 3-car train on our 9:31 a.m. southbound trip, arrived at Larkspur at 10:50. We had 137 passengers get off the train there. Then we had a special return trip that departed Larkspur at 6:20 p.m. 59 passengers on that train, and then the last train departed Larkspur at 7:30 p.m. had 61 boardings at Larkspur. So it's interesting, kind of the rider behavior there. Some chose to take the special train back, and others maybe had lunch, had dinner, maybe they took another ferry back, but they chose to use that 7:30 p.m. trip instead of the special. Sunday, June 12th ridership was 995. And that ridership was 62% above the prior Sunday average. Our next game is this Sunday, June 26th versus the Cincinnati Reds. We are planning to run the same level of service. We will be watching, seeing how this works out, be monitoring performance. And then I guess we have to look at and review alternatives. You know, do we try to serve this with regular service? Do we keep the special trip? And, you know, should we just add a 3-car train on that 7:30 p.m. trip? So again, this is just about looking at the ridership and determining what's the right level of service to provide. And then I think we also need to look at special fare pricing for this service. Obviously, running the 3-car train is additional cost, and running a special train is additional cost. Excuse me, the ferry charges a special price when they run the Giants ferry. So anyway, this is just something that we will have to discuss with the board, make a determination if we decide to move forward, will we want to come up with a special fare. And that is it for the ridership report. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from anyone? Okay, no, we have a couple. Tanya and Tanya first, then a second.
And not a question, but just a comment. I think this is really exciting to see the ridership increases, and kudos to staff for, I think, some creative ways of encouraging ridership. I really like the tips for trips and this Giants game service, because to me, it seems like a way of getting potentially new folks on the train who maybe hadn't thought about using the train before, and really increasing that knowledge and understanding of the benefits of transit and Smarten. So I think it's really, really fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis, did you have a comment?
Yeah. Again, just to echo what Tanya just said, is that compliments to the general manager and to the staff who are putting together this idea. Again, these special events to get new people to ride, again, smart is so great. And I think it's beyond just a commuter train, that it's got to service the community on weekends, wine events, tourist events, this, that, whatever. And so for you to explore this and to expand on that, I think is just awesome. And congratulations, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, let's see. If nothing else, we'll move on to the financial update. We're trying to keep us on track and finish up by 9. So we'll have our financial update by Heather. You're on.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I am going to share my screen now. So can you guys see that?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this. I just wanted to point out this is what you just saw in Eddie's presentation. And one of the things I wanted to point out here is that we really need to focus on these and the development of the goals and strategies, because you can't accomplish what you don't fund. So really the purpose of the budget is to be able to direct your resources in a way that you can accomplish whatever those strategic goals are. So that's really why I wanted to point this out, because that's where we want to be. And we really try to focus on that in this budget for fiscal year 23. A little bit about our revenues. The largest portion of our revenues, as you'll see here, is sales tax. I'm gonna go to the next screen so you can see that. It makes up about,
Heather,
yeah.
We're not seeing presentation view, and the slides are not advancing.
Oh, okay, hold on.
I think you shared the wrong screen.
Let me see here.
It looks like you're on the right screen now, Heather.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're on slide 8 now. So you
Okay.
have to go back. Yeah.
Go back up. Let me see. I'm going to have to go this way, do it this way. So let me. Okay. Can you see the sales tax?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'll use this other screen. Okay. So the largest funding source is our sales tax, which is 58%. And we're estimating that generate about $51.6 million, which is quite a bit higher than the current fiscal year. We're going to continue to monitor that on a monthly basis. And of course, one of the reasons for that is because of the inflationary period that we're in right now. This forecast was done prior to that inflation really taking off. So it could have an impact on that. So we'll be monitoring that and reporting that regularly to the board on a monthly basis, as we do now. State grants is the next largest funding source at 24%. Then federal funds, and we were fortunate to get ARP discretionary money, which is the COVID funds. We applied for discretionary money and we did receive $7.5 million. So that has been included in this year's budget. And then we are estimating fair revenues at about $2.3 million based on that increased ridership that was discussed. And I believe it's right around 596,000 riders is what we're estimating. So of course, if we don't hit that mark, fair revenues won't be quite as high. We did assume on fair revenues also that the structure would remain the same. Remember, we cut fares by 40% a year ago. And so we're assuming those reductions stay in place through the end of this fiscal year. And then from a parking perspective, we assume no fees for parking through 23. The board had passed a resolution that we would suspend them through August, but now this takes it through the end of fiscal year 23. From an expenditure standpoint, on the operations side, as you can imagine, people are our largest cost, or about 73%. And then services and supplies make up the remaining 27%. Right now, the largest cost item is fuel. So it's not necessarily because we increased the amount of fuel that we're using, although we did a little bit based on the additional trips that we're running. But right now, the cost of fuel is really driving this cost line item. On the administration front, that includes everything in human resources, information systems, finance, accounting, procurement, legal, real estate, planning, communications. So a large group of people. In this case, salaries and benefits make up a smaller portion of the whole pot, whereas things like insurance and paying our audit costs and those type of things are included in our services and supplies. The largest driver in this is insurance, which is about 26% of that amount of services and supplies. And that's related to our rail liability insurance. It keeps going up exponentially. And that's pretty much a cost that's difficult to control because it's more because of the market. It's not available in the open market. On the engineering capital side, again, we're back to salaries and benefits make up the majority of those costs. And about 80% though of those costs are charged to projects. So you'll see them against projects versus showing up in our overall admin or operating budget. So non-capital expenditures, we've already discussed salary, supplies, and debt service. In this one, I'm going to talk a little bit about planning projects and environmental projects. On the planning side, we're going to be working on an on-board survey this year. Part of that ridership goal. On the pathway side, we're going to be doing wayfinding. And then we're also going to be looking at a corridor level service planning study. That's going to be funded by the state. And that will help us determine what we might be looking at going north and also east potentially. On the environmental side, we have ongoing mitigation projects, which all of these are. And as projects get done, we're assuming we'll continue to take on more environmental mitigation and monitoring projects for those future construction projects. On the pathway side, we have a grant funded the Sonoma County Gap Pathway Project. We have that going on and going to bid this year, as well as the Payran to Lakeville Pathway Project. And we're going to continue design and permitting on all the other missing segments in Marin and Sonoma counties up to Windsor. On the Windsor project, as many of you know, we're still pending resolution of the RM3 court case. So that project has actually been stopped mid-construction. And we're currently pursuing other funding sources, so federal funds and other state sources to see if we can get that project complete, regardless of whether or not the RM3 money comes through for this. This is a grouping of projects we call State of Good Repair in the transit world. And so they include all the things listed here. And these are things that we need to do on a regular basis, on an annual basis, to keep our assets in a state of good repair. So even though we have a newer system, only 5 years old, we need each year to continue to maintain that so we don't get in a situation where you see some of those larger agencies where they can't, they actually have to stop service. They have problems with service because they can't maintain the assets that they have. And then we've also set aside $2 million to match grants that we're pursuing this year. So we wanted to make sure we had the ability to match anything that comes through. that Joanne pursues on a regular basis. So we can, move forward with those grants if we get them. Okay, a little bit about freight. And I know I'm going really fast here, but I wanted to make sure we get this in. On the freight side, we're estimating we're going to get $4 million from the state. In the 2021 bill, they have $4 million in the budget bill for us for that. We have a grant coming through for Blackpoint Bridge of $206,000. We're estimating $1.1 million in freight movement fees. So these would be from the people that are shipping goods with us, and $92,000 for freight storage fees. This is significantly less than what you've seen in the past because of the elimination of the storage of the LPG tankers. And then on the leases side, we've estimated $146,000 in leases. On the expenditure side, we're estimating $786,000 in salaries. That's a total of 6 FTE or full-time equivalent positions. Services and supplies, we're estimating at 1.1 million. And the largest issue around services and supplies is really the condition of the assets that we have. So not only does it affect services and supplies, having to repair our locomotives, having to get some basic abatement done as far as weed control and other things on our right of way. We also have the capital estate good repair where we have to do significant improvements to the State Highway 37 grade crossing, numerous bridges. We have a brake upgrade that needs to be done, and we need to add PTC to one of the locomotives. So right now, our current budget for that in the current year is 2.6 million. We could actually need to spend a lot more than that, but this is as much as we think we can accomplish with the resources that we have available as far as manpower, et cetera. And then carry forwards. Each year we have projects and programs that aren't accomplished. So those get carried forward from one year to the next. So we have those projects that have been estimated that won't be done by the end of June, which is at the end of next week. And then those will be reconciled in our amended budget in the January, February timeframe. And then I wanted to let you know a little bit about our reserves. We're contributing around $500,000, and that's really based on our actuarial. So it varies a little bit from that each year. That puts our pension liability reserve at $4 million. We've estimated our equipment reserve. We're contributing $2 million in 23. Our balance will be 9.6 million. Just to let you know, we've assumed what we're setting this money aside for is replacement of our rail cars. We've assumed that when those need to be replaced, if I back into that number, I need to put about $6 million aside each year. Right now, we don't have those kind of funds, so we're setting at least $2 million aside, and then the assumption will be when the time comes, we'll have to issue debt for the remaining amount. Corridor completion, this is a reserve, and I've left that alone at $7 million. And then our operating reserve is current policy is 25% of operations or a minimum of $10 million. So it's at $10 million right now. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Okay.
Try to end this.
Any questions? Here we go. Steve, you have a question?
Yes, I have two questions. The first relates to inflation. How is that going to affect wages and so forth? It's costing us more to buy things. It's probably going to cost us more to keep our staff. And it will probably cost us a great deal more to replace our vehicles. And what are we building into the budget to cope with all of that? And then my second question is a little bit off the chart, and that is the SR 37 project is being studied extensively by Caltrans and others. but there is a grade crossing that is probably going to need to become a grade separation. Do we have any funding put aside for the planning for that?
So I'm going to take your first question and then I'll take a stab at the second one, let Bill probably address it, the second question. So on the first question, yes, inflation is a concern for us. We have built in for the employees that are not represented by the union, a 3% increase in fiscal year 23, so effective July 1. Actually, it's effective July 11th, but on the represented side, we're in negotiations now for that. So I can't tell you what that will look like because we haven't finished negotiations. On the issue of things like project cost, etc., anything that I had an estimate from a previous year on, I inflated it by 5%. Anything that we and then anything new we had, we assumed some higher numbers for that. I will say though, our bids have come in recently significantly higher than what we anticipated. And so, it may get to the situation if the inflation continues to rise at the rate that it has, that we actually have to cut scope. So for instance, on the Blackpoint Bridge, our bids came in double what we had as the engineer's estimate. So we had to do a combination of things. We had to put more money into the project and we cut back the scope. So my guess is we're going to have to do that as we open bids on these other projects. But where we could, we had tried to assume an inflation factor of about 5% for the current fiscal year. The second question, we do have money in there for the State Highway 37 crossing, but it's just to do enough to get by for right now, knowing that the state is going to come back later and do a much larger project. We do not have money set aside for a grade separation, but we do have some money set aside to do those repairs. And I'm going to let Bill, if he's on, I'm assuming he's on, talk a little bit if you can answer that question about what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah, we are cognizant of the challenges with the Highway 37 crossing, Steve. In fact, there was a quick call for projects that popped up a couple months ago for grade crossings, and we did submit a request for a grade crossing that we figured would be done in concert with Caltrans as part of that segment B of the Highway 37 improvements. We were unsuccessful, but we're continuing to put it out there. We are looking at, I'll touch on that in my slides, but we are looking at reconstructing Highway 37, hopefully this fall or in the spring, because it needs to be done. But I'll touch on that a little bit more.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Any other questions before we move on to, we'll go back to Bill and capital projects update.
Good morning, Chair Colombo, committee members. Let me do a share screen and bring up my slides. Are you seeing the full screen or the preview screen?
Preview.
Where it is.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump in.
That's fine.
Please do.
So Heather was a great overview for the capital projects. She touched on a lot of the categories and work that we're doing in getting into in fiscal 23. I'm going to touch on three big categories today that we're looking at: pathways, bridge work, and grade crossings. And pathways has been a tremendous amount of work, and it continues to be in fiscal 23. I've got this high level overview here that we'll take a look at. So this looks at the entire corridor from Larkspur up to Windsor in terms of pathways. It's generally divided by the Marin Sonoma Narrows, which kind of separates Marin to the south and Sonoma County to the north. In Marin County, we've constructed approximately 4.5 miles of pathway to date in Smart Right of Way. We've got approximately 1 mile that's designed and funded for construction. And I'm going to get into these details in just a sec. And then approximately 6 miles in design and looking for funding for construction. In Sonoma County, we've built about 7.2 miles in the smart right-of-way. We've got approximately 6 miles that are designed and funded for construction. And then we're working on design and permitting for an additional 9.3 miles of pathway in the smart right-of-way. These numbers do not include pathways that we've tied to, leveraged, or being constructed by our partners that are part of our overall network. Okay, so there's a lot of data here, but the key to this is down here in that the green line items are funded for construction, and we're approaching construction. Those in yellow are in the design phase and the permitting phase. So again, we've got Marin on the top, Sonoma on the bottom. So we're going south to north as we come down the table. This first segment up here, McGinnis Parkway to Smith Ranch Road. Beautiful connector in Santa Fe from the Civic Center station, heads up towards the McGinnis Park recreational facility. We do have construction funding on that. We're about to start our permitting efforts. So we're looking at construction in the fall of 23 on that. And I've got another schedule slide we'll drop into a little bit. And then we've got 4 segments here in Sonoma County, Petaluma to Pengrove, Rohnert Park to Southern Santa Rosa, and then a small connector piece in downtown Santa Rosa. Looking at the slides on these are the segments of pathways that do have construction funding. So they're scheduled for construction. This first one in Petaluma, Payrin to Lakeville. We're wrapping up our design and permitting efforts right now. We're hoping to get out to bid and construct this segment in the 4th quarter while the weather's still good. Nice connector up to the section from Payrin to South Point that we built and opened a couple of years ago. Then we've got South Point Boulevard in Petaluma to Main Street in Pengrove, nearly a 3-mile segment of pathway, beautiful connector. That too has construction funding. That was our ATP grant that we got through MTC a couple years ago. We're looking at construction in the spring of 2023, and closely connected to that is this other segment that's part of that same grant, Golf Course Drive in Rohnert Park to Bellevue Avenue in Southern Santa Rosa. And then the Joe Rodota Trail to 3rd Street, a small connector piece that's tied closely with the work that City of Santa Rosa is doing. They were part of the same grant to signalize that crossing across 3rd. So the two really have to go hand in hand to make that work. And then finally, I touched on McGinnis Parkway to Smith Ranch Road, really pushing the permitting effort on this one, a challenging area with endangered species habitat. So we have a tight work window that we can't even start work till September 1st. So we're targeting on hitting that work in September of 2023. Moving on to bridges, we have a fairly rigorous annual bridge inspection program that we do. We look at all our bridges. We've got 4 types of bridges in our systems, both passenger and freight. We've got older timber trestles that are in various states of rehabilitation or repairs. We have concrete trestles. These are trestles we've replaced as part of our reconstruction efforts. We have movable bridges, 1 on the main line over the Petaluma River, 2 on the Brazos branch where our freight operates, and then we have a few steel deck bridges as well. So those all get annual inspections. We work closely with the FRA on that, and we have an inspection program on file with them. And as you can see here, the FRA inspector was on site this past fall, auditing our program, and actually went around inspecting bridges with us.
Hey, Bill, can I interrupt you for just 1 second? We have Director Garbarino on. She has a 9 o'clock she has to get to.
Yeah.
She just has a couple of things she would like to say to the COC. So can we unmute Director Garbarino, please?
Go for it.
She is unmuted. Please go ahead.
I'm still seeing she looks muted.
Still muted.
See her on the screen, but her showing muted.
I've asked her a couple times to unmute.
Does she have?
Yes.
Unfortunately, right now she's muted. She's unable. I can't unmute her on my end. She'll have to unmute on her end. Director Garbarino, if you can hear us, please unmute.
Moving right along.
Yeah, okay. We'll have to come back to that. So go ahead, Bill. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so back to bridges. So we've got 2 timber trestles that we're looking at replacing probably in the fall of 2023. We're in the design and permitting phase right now. These are both in Novato, near the airport and also near the landfill. On the Brazos branch, so we inherited freight operations on March 1st of this year. We have some bridges that date back to the early mid 1900s and a lot of deferred maintenance out there. So we're putting together some repair projects that'll go through, replace elements of those timber trestles and get them into good shape. Looking at doing that probably in the spring of 23. And then finally, I think Heather touched on the Blackpoint Bridge. We did have a barge hit our fender protection system out there, really consists of piles and timber supports, and that's scheduled for repair this fall. And then finally, grade crossings. Steve, you brought up Highway 37. We are looking to reconstruct Highway 37. That crossing is just tough. It takes a lot of beating, tremendous amount of traffic out there, a lot of truck traffic. So we're looking at trying to get that done in late 2022 or early 2023. And then McDowell Boulevard here in Petaluma, the city is paving McDowell. It's a crossing we didn't reconstruct as part of our mainline work because it still had some good life in it, but it is now time to work on that as well. So that's coming up later this year or also in the spring. So that about covers everything I had. Happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have a question for Bill? Don't see any. Thank you, Bill. That's thanks for the great update.
Chair, could we allow Director Garbarino to speak now? She signed back in. We've been having some technical difficulties.
Okay.
Director Garbarino, can you unmute? Okay, maybe not.
There we go.
Yeah, unfortunately, she is not able to unmute at this time.
Okay. Well, I did talk to her on the phone. She called me just a few minutes ago. She just wanted me to let you know that she has been on the call. She has been listening, and that's her calling now, that she has been listening, and she's supportive of a lot of the discussion that's took place and looks forward to the meeting on July 16th. So
Is that the date? Are you sure about that date, Eddie?
let me look.
I think.
I believe the date for the board meeting is July 20th, but Eddie has to have everything done by the 16th. So he has that on his calendar for the 16th.
It's the
So
20th.
everything will have to be complete and ready to submit by the 15th, 16th. So
Oh, got
board
it. Yeah.
meeting is on the 20th. So I have that on his schedule. So he's ahead of the game.
Okay. I didn't know they have meetings on Saturdays, so appreciate everyone's input today. This has been a good meeting. What I'd like to do is I'll come back to the 3 people who suggested that they'd like to help, and what I want to do is get everybody's input as to the way they see this working, and then we'll try to come up with something combined that we can go then to the full citizen COC for review and approval that we then can get to the hopefully get to the board. And I think that's probably the most efficient way to do it. And I hope everybody's okay with that. And we'll do that really quickly because we don't have a lot of time between now and the 16th to have it ready. So I will do that here in the next few days. You'll hear from me. So
Russ,
yes.
we do have a hand raised for public comment. So before we go
yeah.
into that, I think we should listen to the public comment.
Okay.
We have Richard C. Brand. Please go ahead.
Yes, good morning, and thank you. This has been a good meeting, and lots of good ideas to share. Colombo, I just wondered, maybe it was early, but I didn't hear the actual action items coming out of this meeting that to summarize what will be happening as a result of this of the meeting today. That's my question.
Okay. There are three people plus myself that will work together to come up with a suggested restructure of COC and also another committee, which I think Eddie refers to it as the ETAC, the Executive Team Advisory Committee, and hopefully we can come up with a structure that we would be comfortable with at COC, and then when everybody is okay with that, we will then go to the board, and the plan is to have that ready before the board meeting, the SMART board meeting, which is on July 20th. But we would have all our recommendations in place, ready to go before the 16th, which is.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, any other from the committee, from the community?
I don't see any other hands raised, but I do see David Oster with his hand raised.
Okay, I do too. David, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. If you can hear me. I don't know if this is the right time to mention this, but I had a question about the civil grand jury. I mean, you talked about responses by the board and all, but then those are required responses. But my understanding is that they've invited responses to the report from the COC, among others. And I'm wondering whether or not that the COC is going to be, taking action to, do that. So anyway, I mean, that's a separate little thing. And I was wondering, what kind of guidance is going to be given on that, if this makes sense.
I did get a letter with an invitation to respond, and on a number of items that they brought up. I have not responded to those. I'm not required to. I thought about that, and I thought that I'm not sure that since we're invited, not required, that would serve any useful purpose for us to respond. Because I think that I let the management team respond to their requests. They're not invited. I think they're required. But I'm not sure, and I'm certainly open to comments from the COC. But I'm not sure it's going to serve a useful purpose for us to respond, because it kind of leads you in the direction of, gee, shouldn't we have done this or shouldn't we have done that? And I don't like to get in those kinds of discussions personally. So I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts on that.
Good.
So nothing. Anyway.
That might be a question for our lawyer for SMART to advise us on.
Yep, maybe so.
I'd be happy to weigh in. So as Russ said, it is a invitation. They are not required, or you're not required to respond. Only the board is required to respond to them with respect to the issues. The COC can respond if they wish to respond, but a lot of the grand jury's recommendations and findings are a decision that the board is going to have to make, not the COC. And
Right.
so with that said, it's not maybe the purview of the COC to respond to them.
Right, good.
I think frankly, if we start making comments and responses which are in conflict with the board, I think that creates a whole nother issue. And I just assume step back and let the board do their job and respond appropriately.
Good.
So. All right. Anything else? And we should probably set a next meeting date. And you know, we have this in front of us here before the 16th, before the 20th, I should say. I don't know, maybe we should not set a meeting date until we've kind of completed that, and then we can, after the board meeting, we can set a meeting date after the board meeting. If that's people, is any comments on that? Maybe if people can. Eddie, any comments on that in terms of meeting date?
No, I think that's fine. If you want to wait till after the board meeting and see kind of what those what the decisions are made, you know, whether it's quarterly or whether it continues. I think we'll learn a lot after that meeting.
Yep, I think that's right. So that will give us a better. So I will be in contact with with Steve and Tanya and who was the third? Peter. This week, and we'll go from there, and we'll try to work out something and get it to the COC and have it review it. And then Eddie, I like your input on it, and we'll see where we go from here, and hopefully we can move forward appropriately in the future.
Great, thank you.
All right. Anything else before we adjourn? I want to thank the staff for the presentations and the detail, and both on the projects as well financials, and Eddie, all your time. I appreciate all your work on this, and get more passengers in the trains, right? Good. All righty.
Russ,
yes.
I will follow up with an email to you about the deadlines to have all this, and that way you and everybody could be on the same page with timelines, also with Eddie, because it's the holidays coming up too. We got 2 weeks, and that way everybody's on the same page.
Sounds great. Thank you, Letty. Awesome. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll move to adjourn.
Good.
Second. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you for your time and effort this morning, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.